Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and once again, this is Legal Matters, the program that's been designed to address critical and sometimes contentious issues that are facing consumers and businesses today. Legal information, practical solutions, and straight talk about a wide variety of topics that affect your home and work life. Finance and family law to Social Security, workers' comp, and more. Once again, we'll get help from our legal experts, from Bazar, Grasso law firm in East Providence. To my right, Jackie Grasso, and to her right, David Bazar. So we've discussed identity theft in the past and internet cyber crimes. Combine the two, and there's a whole new realm of financial and emotional torture just set up for you. Even your newborn might be in jeopardy these days. And while parents are typically expected to be the protester or the protectors, in some cases now they're even the culprits. There's child ID theft. We'll speak about adult credit cards that are stolen, celebrities that are impersonated, and recently a sports superstar, heartbroken, victimized, mainly digitally duped. So identity theft can happen to anyone. Financial, it can be criminal. What's a crime and what's not? Let's talk about it. What is identity theft? How does it happen?
Well, simply, it's just somebody taking your personal information and using it to their own personal gain. So they can get your social security number, date of birth, they can get any information about you that's reachable. And there are many ways they can do it. Nowadays we have the internet, and that seems to be the easiest way and probably much more, I guess, reachable because of the anonymity involved in the access. So anybody can get into it. I mean, you might get an email and it'll say, well, from your bank, email from your bank saying, please check in, or PayPal, your order is ready, something like that. You click into it, and without even knowing it, you might be in some kind of a phishing type thing. But they can have access to your personal information on the internet. So.
Historically, I've seen it come up in other areas. I had clients who had hospitalizations, and all their information in the hospital records, some unscrupulous employee, perhaps of the hospital, gathered information and sold it or passed it along, and they then had credit cards opened up in their names in places they had never been. Jackie's 100% right. With the internet, that sort of proliferated to the ability to gain access to people's information.
Interestingly, and apparently there's quite a surge in child identity theft, which I hadn't really realized would be such a welcome market, but they certainly make a tempting target for identity thieves because the theft of a child's identity may go undetected for years, and then by the time the child wants a credit card or a loan or whatever, he finds such terrible things can happen. And while I guess you'd think that a parent would want to protect identities, they would think of protecting their own identity, their husbands, their wives, but not so much the children's. How can it happen that a parent would allow or not know that a child's identity was being stolen? How does it happen?
As an adult, we have the ability to access our credit reports. So the minute we access our credit report, we can see if there's any suspicious activity going on, which raises a red flag. We don't typically check credit report of a 2-year-old child. Somehow they get access to a child's social security number. It could be a number of ways. It could be through a tax return that they threw away and didn't shred, because if you're listing children as a dependent, you have to list their social security numbers on the tax return. It could be from a hospital, as David had mentioned, any type of questionnaire. People fish through garbage pails, believe it or not, and they say
dumpster diver.
Yeah, dumpster divers. When you throw something away of personal information, you should have it shredded. Although that seems cumbersome to some people, but in the end, it is going to be helpful for you to prevent
you need to do whatever you can to protect that information. As Jackie said before, the internet provides an avenue sometimes that people can even hack into other people's computers. The old-fashioned way of getting them, the best protection is shredding information and not giving out information. You get telephone calls. That's another way this used to happen. People would call and say, oh, we are updating your records for such and such. We need your social security number or your child's or whatever information. Don't give out information over the phone. Don't throw things away without shredding them.
And apparently, relative to this child identity theft situation, apart from the fact that it could impact on them years later in terms of their finances, a couple of occasions, I read that there could be a medical mishap because of it. Someone stole the child's identity, and with the electronic records now, incorrect information could be associated with that person. It was actually the one who stole the identity's information, maybe even the wrong blood type, that could have serious impact on the child. What about the possibility, it seems so unlikely, but what about the possibility that the parents are the culprits, that it is they who stole their own child's identity, thinking that they could stave off paying bills? How can that possibly happen? And what's the child or what's the parent, what can be done?
Well, if that happens, then that means the parent is taking the child's Social Security number and applying for credit under that name and Social Security number. That's fraud. And there are penalties, both state and federal. Eventually, they will get caught. If they're not paying the bills, they're going to be contacted from a credit agency or a collection agency, or at some point they might be sued. The parent might then say, "Well, I have a defense. You know, my child's identity was stolen." How you track it to the parent? I'm sure there are ways you can trace it to the parent.
What's legal and what's not? It certainly isn't nice that a parent would use his child's identity. He's stealing an identity. Is that legal every state? Is that legal on occasion?
The question actually is it illegal? Because what you're doing is, forget the child and the legalities to that child. You are defrauding someone who's given you credit. You're saying you're somebody you're not, you're giving information you're not, you may be making it more difficult for them to collect back what they lend you, whether by credit card or a loan or however it is. So when you defraud somebody, it's always illegal, even if you're using your child's information to defraud them.
Some of these things might go undetected, as we're talking about with children especially. I would imagine that if your 4-year-old gets a credit card application, that might be reason to have the parent be suspicious, and if it isn't the parent, him or herself, who's causing the trouble. What do you do when you suspect that such fraud is taking place, whether it's the adult or the child?
Well, you want to contact your local authorities, you want to call your Attorney General's office, you want to file a report with your local police department, you can file a report with the federal government.
Credit bureaus.
And then you want to contact your credit bureaus immediately, and you want to have them put a fraud alert on your file. So there should be no charge for that. What you do is just go on any website, any consumer reporting website, and contact your credit bureau. So there are 3. You have Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. If you go on annualcreditreport.com, you can then get a copy of your credit report, 1 free per year for each reporting agency, and it does give you information on how to contact your credit reporting agency and to file a fraud alert claim. Only thing is that having an alert on your file is only there for a short period of time. I want to say either 30 or 60 days. I think it's actually longer than that. But by putting that fraud alert on your credit report, that means anytime you thereafter apply for credit, you may be denied because there's a flag that's noticed on your reporting.
A penalty to you.
It
Yes.
may make it more difficult for you to get
Yes.
credit. And the important thing, as Jackie was saying, is if you get something that looks unusual or out of the ordinary, you might want to pull your credit report just to check to see if there's anything else on there that
Do
doesn't
it once
belong.
a year anyway. You get 1 free year from that credit reporting website. 1 free a year. Yeah.
And I understand from doing some research on this topic that, as you mentioned, you would want to notify the police.
Oh, definitely.
Reading a little bit about that, there are many occasions when they don't want to take the report. I read that you must insist that they take the report. They
Yes.
may be saying it isn't you who ends up suffering. It would be the
Creditor.
vendor or exactly the creditor who would be with the short end of the stick. So how does that play out?
Well, if they refuse to take the report, then you're going to have a hard time proving theft to your credit card company, because without a police report, they're not going to process the claim. So everybody needs to know if there is some fraud involved on a credit card, you're only responsible for $50. Anything over that is not your responsibility. However, you have to provide supporting documentation. An affidavit, a police report should suffice. The other thing, too, that I think is important is most of your credit cards do have security features built into it. So, for instance, my Discover card, they email me and text me anytime there is a charge on my card more than $300. All of the credit card companies are doing that now, and it's a free service available to anybody, so that if there is a charge on my card, I get an email, I get a text message, I click into it, and I can see what was charged. And quite frequently, it could be, I use my credit card to pay filing fees. So anytime I pay a filing fee with the bankruptcy court, it comes up on my card. I automatically get a text from Discover and says a large purchase has occurred on your card. And I look at it, $306, I know exactly where it came from, and it does tell you where it came from.
They also will let you know, for instance, I traveled away for the holidays and charged some things down in the Dominican Republic and immediately got an email from the credit card company saying, unusual activity, please call. So I did, and I said, yes, I'm in the Dominican. They asked how long you're going to be there, and does anyone else have your card back in the United States?
Equally important, and I remember at one point you did not have the same kind of protection if you used or had a debit card. Has that changed, or what's the status of that? In other words, if someone stole your debit card and went to town and started buying and charging, would you have the same protection of the $50 limit, or
Yes.
is that just...
You still have the same
You
protection,
do.
because even though it's being debited, the funds are being drawn from a cash account, it's still being used as a credit card. So you do have the same protection. But you have to follow through on notifying the authorities and sending a police report to the credit reporting agency and following through on it.
And to go back to the other thing you said about the police not wanting necessarily to take a report because it's the creditor that's damaged, well, you're damaged too. Number one, if you just want to say there's a $50 liability you have, well, that's damage. But more important than that, it's your credit reputation and your name that's being used illegally. That is damage that the police should be able to understand and take a report about.
Oh, and the Attorney General's website, the office does have a Consumer Affairs division, and they want to know about identity theft. Impersonations for the same thing, different subject, but people knocking on your door pretending to be from the gas company when in actuality they're not. So the website is very good because they do have updates from time to time on any schemes that are going around. Most of the time they're targeting elderly people, and elderly people are being called too. For scams, for credit card scams as well.
In fact, the Attorney General had one not too long ago when the Patriots were still playing football about tickets and illegal or fraudulent tickets being sold, and to be careful who you buy tickets from for that. So there are cases like that all the time. I think there was a place out in Massachusetts where somebody was selling tickets to events or concerts that weren't happening.
Is there any difference between when someone steals your identity for their own financial gain versus for criminal use? So maybe they were involved in drug trafficking or money laundering versus just taking your bank account, or you're charging something at Filene's or whatever.
It's still a crime.
Macy's.
It's
Either
still
way.
a crime, fraud. Yeah, it's still. I mean, if drug use is involved, then I think you're facing stiffer penalties.
Is that
Well, and you're still the issue for the person of saying, this wasn't me, and being able to prove that somebody stole their ID or information to use it to do illegal things.
And while we were talking about children, and you mentioned credit reports, is there any reason that without you're really being suspicious of some activity, should you get a credit report for your child?
I don't know that there would be one because they have no credit.
But if if you thought that someone was you got some strange mail, for example, would that prompt, or should that prompt you
Definitely.
to look at a credit report, because somewhere then you would see some
Oh yeah,
activity?
if you're getting a bill in your child's name, then
Or a tax return?
or a tax.
Not a tax return, but a tax letter or something. Please submit what your wages were, and no 4-year-old is.
Yeah, you want to get a credit report. It's not going to hurt. Definitely want to do that because somebody somewhere has applied for credit, and once you apply for credit, it goes through the 3 credit reporting agencies. So you do want to follow up on that. I think the other thing that's important that people should know as well is those that own homes our homeowners policies do provide for claims being
Good to know.
for identity theft claims. So they can help you out. I don't know how much the coverage would be. It varies from policy to policy. Most people don't know that you can actually file a claim on your own homeowners policy.
With the kind of activity and new and creative ways that people are duping others, I guess that's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
On the level of stealing an identity that's easy but not necessarily causing financial harm, in the news, sports superstar Mr. Teo has had some issues about someone posing as someone else. There's heartbreak involved. There's not necessarily some financial damage. Is there a law broken there?
I don't know about that because it was somebody pretending to be someone else.
Who didn't exist.
Who didn't
apparently.
exist,
They created
yes.
a fictional character, allegedly.
But there was a photo of
Right.
a real person. I don't know, does that mean her identity might have been stolen?
But I don't
or?
think they used her name.
They
They
didn't.
stole
They
her
made-
likeness
Okay.
and used her likeness perhaps illegally.
Maybe there's civil damages
maybe.
between them.
But for poor Monty Teo, if you
Yeah.
believe his story, and I don't know enough of it to know exactly what's true and what's not, and I've heard actually these kind of stories before. He's not the first person I've heard fall for something like this, but they created a fictional character, and they had correspondence with him through the internet,
Yes.
and he fell in love with and considered
An
himself
apparition.
dating apparition, this person who didn't exist, and I guess had gone to meet her on one or more occasions, and she never showed up, but still carried on with the relationship until it was clear that this was a hoax.
So it gave rise, news of this gave rise to a term, not
Catfishing.
catfishing.
Yeah.
The bottom feeders who will do whatever, but they're actually creating a false identity. Is it illegal to create a false identity? I mean, it's certainly heartbreaking for poor Monty.
I suppose it depends what you do with it as well. Now, let's suppose they created this and they were asking him for money. I'm sick, I need money to get my medical treatment, will you send me
be
money?
billed.
Now, it isn't, you're again defrauding somebody, and whether you create the identity to do it with or steal it, it's still a crime.
Well, I think also you have to look at the standards for the website by which they're creating this identity. So there might be something connected through the website that says, you participate in using our site, but you agree you're not going to commit fraud or, catfish or whatever it is. Then there might be some liability there.
See, that's what I
I'm not sure
wasn't,
about
as I
criminal.
was looking at this, I wasn't quite sure that I could make the distinction between when someone steals an identity for clearly financial gain, as you're saying, going to bilk somebody, or rather, what do they call it, cyber heartbreak, which is sad, but is it punishable as a crime, per se?
If the injury is simply you dupe somebody into falling in love with somebody who didn't exist, there's probably not a crime in and of itself for that. The person who fell for it has to really take a look at themselves and say, what was I doing? As much as, well, not as much, but to some degree. In any event, there is no taking of anything other than somebody's time and emotion, and I don't think that is a crime in and of itself.
Sad as it is.
Sad as it is.
Sad as it is. So apparently phishing, what's the other one? There's altering links that you would find on a website or an email that came to you. Click here. An altered link may be actually something that someone finagled and found a way for them to get access to your bank cards or your other credit information. How much can we possibly caution people to be alerted to without getting people paranoid about every email that comes in or every request for information? What's the best simple way of avoiding such trouble?
Well, if you get an email from your bank, for instance, and your bank says, we're offering 0.5% on credit cards, please
Click this
click
link.
this link and file an application. The old adage, if it's too good to be true, it isn't true. My advice would be call the bank. Ask them if that email was sent out. Okay, always notify the bank, either by phone or in writing, because it could be some type of fraud.
Yeah. I would always call.
Call the bank.
Because if you know you're dialing the number and you're initiating the contact, you know you're getting to who you want to get to, as long as you make sure you know it's the bank's number and not a number that was given to you by some email from the bank.
Good piece of advice.
So
Initiate.
I would not ever respond to an email from the bank or any creditor to give information without calling and being the one to initiate the contact to make sure it's legitimate.
And the bank websites are, they follow through. But anytime I change an address on one of my bills for bill pay, they automatically send me an email saying, we got this notice, an address was changed. If that wasn't completed by you, please contact the bank. The other thing people should do is they need to go in and change their passwords frequently.
Oh, dear.
And I'm guilty of it because I can't remember what I ate for breakfast this morning. So people tend to use the same password for everything, okay? And by doing that, you know, if an agency gets one, if a criminal gets one password, then they can start using that same password for all of your banking accounts or credit cards. So you want to go in and frequently change your password or create a password that's difficult to remember. You know, 2 letters, maybe 1 capitalized, 3 numbers, and 2 letters after that, something like that.
My, how complicated life has
It
become.
is. Yeah, it is.
So if these kinds of things, if you've been duped by the phishing scheme or things of like, are people generally able to wade through and correct the things, clear them out one by one themselves, or do they really need to go to another website, hire a lawyer, or hire someone else to clean up the mess?
We want to start with the consumer reporting agencies. You want to put that freeze on your credit report and print out the report, look for whatever it is that's suspicious, contact the actual credit company that is showing the particular suspicious activity, tell them that this is not any of your those are not any of your transactions, and then follow up with the credit reporting agency. You can go through, I think the Federal Trade Commission, they have a consumer affairs division. You definitely want to make sure that it's well documented.
What has happened to you, you
Yes,
mean? So
it's not that easy to
printing
clear it
out-
up. And don't just print it once and have it for 9-10 months. Go back and print your credit report again to make sure nothing else is there. Anytime you make an adjustment to your credit report, the credit reporting agency has 30 days to respond to you with an update on your credit report.
Well, while we're on that topic then, suppose you happen to be one who was in the market for a loan while all of this nonsense is going on. Every time you go to get a credit report, doesn't that put a little ding on the credit anyway? Or is it a matter of lesser of evils?
Well, it does, because it does affect your credit score, but I think if you go in for an inquiry, I think there's a way that you can indicate what the inquiry is for. If it's for a credit freeze or a fraud alert, it will indicate that on your report.
And every time you apply for a loan and the creditors go out and do the inquiry, there's a little ding on your credit score.
It is.
And I guess in all cases, once you've either posted a fraud alert or found that you actually needed to cancel your card, it's fairly easy to have another credit card issued in your name, I guess. What happens if your Social Security number, or your child's in this case, in one case, if those Social Security numbers are stolen, do you get another Social Security number? I would think that that would be fraught with
You can't.
terrible
You can't.
issues.
That's why you have to keep following through with these federal and state agencies, credit reporting. You know what, years ago, people used to steal identities of deceased individuals. Somebody would die and they no longer use the
Social Security
Social
number.
Security number.
Have them vote many times.
Yeah, that's all the dead people that vote. It's amazing. Yeah.
So you have to, how do you clear out the trouble with your Social Security number? So if someone applied for benefits, say, and it's a 4-year-old or whatever, how do you go through the process of clearing that or finding out in the first place? Do you call Social Security admin and try to work through that?
That's a start. That's
Yeah.
definitely a start.
And you can go to the local Social Security office and they will be helpful. So sometimes it's easier to go in person than to try to do some of that over the phone.
It's difficult. You can't get somebody on the phone.
Right.
It is difficult.
I was going to ask Jackie a little bit about those companies that's supposed to protect your credit, like LifeLock or whatever it's called.
All of the credit companies will offer you, for a monthly fee, some kind of credit security benefit.
Right.
And LifeLock is the same thing. So for a fee, they'll monitor your credit report. They will notify you if there's any suspicious activity. If, in fact, there is identity theft, they will take care of all of that for you. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But you know, having to pay a monthly fee to a credit card company to monitor your credit, to me, doesn't make any sense because you can do that yourself.
Right.
You just have to be vigilant.
Yeah, and people will pay $5 or $10 a month, and why do that when you can do it on your own by reviewing your credit report?
All things considered, does this mean that you feel that while more and more people are buying online or doing their business online, you can say always check to make sure that you have HTTPS and the little gold lock on. But should people really be aware and be wary of doing anything online? It seems that is clearly the direction of the world, and everything is being done online. How much do we have to worry?
There's security in a lot of these websites,
Yeah.
and if you do it carefully and know where you are and what site you're on, there's protection. You can't live your life out of fear. You have to live your life, but you have to do it in an intelligent way. And that means know where you are, know who you're dealing with, and make sure that it's a place that you went to and that you're not responding to somebody who reached out to you.
Yeah, the difficulty with that is the banks now make it attractive for you to do online billing, online payments, because then you won't be paying a fee to use a paper check. Everybody orders things online. It's much easier to do it that way than get in the car when it's 2 below zero and there's 12 inches of snow on the road, and you can just go into Stop and Shop website, order Peapod, and then you have your food delivery. Yeah, it's just so accessible, and it's so easier to use the web. Some people, the old-fashioned way, they would rather write a check. Okay, I remember the last time I've been in a grocery line where somebody actually wrote a check.
I remember the old-fashioned ways we actually used cash.
Cash, yeah, that's true.
That's true, or even gold.
Yeah.
Do you think that are banks actually able to penalize you for not using online?
They're
Because
doing that. Some of them are doing that, yeah.
But some people don't have internet, hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, imagine them being able to ding you another $2 for every time you decided to write the check and post it.
Well, I'd be the first one in line knocking on that door of that bank and complaining about it, and if they continue to do that, I'll go to another bank.
It's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
So you pointed out that to help avoid these problems, make sure you take the initiative. You mentioned, David, calling. I guess that also would pertain to you taking the initiative when an email comes to you, you taking the initiative to email or go to that bank's website. At least you know that that's correct.
Let me just take that even a step further. When I was away and I got the email to contact them, and it said I could respond to the email or call the number that they sent me in the email, I went to the back of my card. There's numbers on the back of the card. I called that number, and then they put me through to the division I needed to be at, so I made sure I was calling the bank and not somebody who sent something to me pretending to be the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice.
You know, I like to tell the credit card company in advance before I go away if I'm going to be out of the country, so that they have it on their file.
Well, thank you for tuning in. The discussion of legal matters continues.